Hello students. Today we are going to discuss about aminoglycoside antibiotics. In today's session we are going to discuss introduction, discovery and chemical structure of aminoglycoside, their classification, general properties of aminoglycosides, mechanism of action of aminoglycoside drugs, mechanism of resistance, general toxicity shared by aminoglycosides, what precautions are required for their use, pharmacokinetic parameters, and therapeutic uses. We will also be discussing about some salient features of individual drugs like streptomycin, gentamicin, kanamycin, amikacin, etc. So let's begin our discussion of aminoglycoside antibiotics. The first drug in this category is streptomycin. You all know that streptomycin is an antibiotic which is discovered second into the world after penicillin into the year 1944. Scientist Waxman has introduced or discovered this drug streptomycin and he was awarded Nobel Prize for this discovery. He developed the drug from the Streptomyces griseus. Other agents which came later into the market were obtained from other actinomides or they are semisynthetic. So aminoglycosides which are derived from the streptomyces have mycin as their suffix like streptomycin. You can see here in streptomyces spelling contains my and the drug name is also containing the suffix mycin. Whereas those which are derived from the micromonospora they end it with the suffix mycin, that is gentamicin. It is easy to remember like this way. So if you can correctly spelling So if you can correctly spell the name of aminoglycoside, you can know the origin that it is derived from either streptomycin or it is derived from the micromonospora. Now let's know the name of the drugs which are there into the category or classification of aminoglycosides. Systemic drugs are streptomycin, gentamicin, kanamycin, tobramycin, amikacin, netilmycin, while topically administered aminoglycosides are neomycin and pramycin. Aminoglycosides are having unique chemical structure. They are large molecule and they have hexose ring. Either streptidin, which is there into the case of streptomycin, or 2-deoxystreptamine, which is present into other aminoglycosides. Along with this hexose ring, various amino sugars are attached with a glycosidic linkage. As you can see here into the diagram that it is a large molecule consisting of a hexose ring. Because of its chemical structure, there are certain properties which are peculiar with the aminoglycosides. They are used as soluble stable sulfate salts only. They are polar molecule so they cannot be absorbed orally and where there is very poor penetration into all the compartments of the body. They are filtered as such and excreted into the urine. They are bactericidal in nature and the activity is more at the alkaline pH. They inhibit bacterial protein synthesis and they are primarily designed for activity against aerobic gram-negative bacteria. Aminoglycosides are narrow spectrum drug designed for action against gram-negative bacteria only. Unlike penicillin, penicillin is a narrow spectrum drug, especially penicillin G, designed for the action against gram-positive bacteria. Similarly, aminoglycosides are narrow spectrum drug designed specifically for action against gram-negative bacteria. They show partial cross resistance among them. They have very narrow margin of safety, so this drug requires monitoring of the patient. And all the aminoglycosides are autotoxic and nephrotoxic in nature. Now we see the mechanism of action in detail. Aminoglycosides are bactericidal drug. If you remember in the previous lecture of macrolide group of drug, that is protein synthesis inhibitor 1, we have discussed that drugs which inhibit the protein synthesis, they produces bacteriostatic effect only. But exception to this rule is aminoglycoside. Though they are inhibiting the protein synthesis, they are bactericidal in nature. The mechanism of action involves two components. As discussed earlier, there is one point that they are very large molecule. So first point for the mechanism of action would be entry of drug inside the bacteria, and second is inhibition of protein synthesis. So how the drug is transported into the organism? The drug enters through the porine channel and they use active transport across the cell membrane by oxygen dependent transport system. That is why the drug becomes inactive in anaerobic state, because oxygen dependent transport fails without oxygen and aminoglycoside antibiotic cannot enter into the bacteria. Their activity is high into the alkaline pH because this transport mechanism works faster in alkaline pH, and simultaneous use of beta lactam antibiotic will enhance the entry of aminoglycosides into the cell, because aminoglycosides are the drug which require facilitation inside the bacteria for entry. Beta lactam is a drug group which inhibit the bacterial cell wall. So if cell wall is weakened, then drug can easily enter inside the cell. That is why combination of beta lactam and aminoglycoside is always synergistic. Now we come to the second part of the mechanism of action, that is actual inhibition of protein synthesis by combining with the ribosome. Streptomycin combined with the 30S ribosome, and other aminoglycoside may combine with 50S or 30S 50S interface, but most of the drug will combine with 30S ribosome. They cause stop of initiation of protein synthesis, polysome formation, and they promote their disintegration into monosomes. Distortion and misreading of mRNA codon occur, which leads to false protein synthesis, and their incorporation into the cell membrane will produce deficient or ineffective cell membrane, ultimately causing bactericidal effect. So to summarize, aminoglycosides are the drug which inhibit the protein synthesis. They are bactericidal in nature. They combine with the 30S bacterial ribosomal subunit as shown into the diagram. This is the 50S subunit and this is the 30S subunit of the bacterial ribosome. The black dot which is shown here is an aminoglycoside antibiotic. It combines with the 30S ribosome and block initiation of protein synthesis. They block further translation and elicit premature termination of the protein synthesis chain, and they cause incorporation of amino acids into the chain, ultimately leading to termination of further protein synthesis and bactericidal effect is produced. After understanding the mechanism of action of aminoglycoside, now we try to understand how resistance develops with the aminoglycoside. How resistance can be developed? Either porine channel cannot work, or there is change into the ribosomal structure through which aminoglycoside cannot attach, or there are certain genetically mediated factors into the bacteria. So first is plasmid mediated resistance, which produces multi-drug resistance form of the bacteria. Here what happens, bacteria will derive acquired membrane bound inactivating enzyme like phosphorylase, adenylase, acetylase, etc., which will destroy the antibiotic outside the bacteria. Other type of resistance can be produced by mutation, which causes reduced affinity of the ribosomal binding proteins. This type of resistance has been shown into E. coli, which is a single step resistance and specific to single drug only, that is aminoglycosides. Sometimes there is reduced efficiency of transport mechanism, which is shown into the Pseudomonas membrane, where they reduce the transport of aminoglycoside inside the cell and produces resistance. Now we see the general toxicities of aminoglycoside antibiotics. First is ototoxicity. It is dose and duration related, which means when you increase the dose of aminoglycoside administration, ototoxicity increases, and Prolonged duration of aminoglycoside use will lead to more ototoxicity. Why this happens? Because aminoglycoside has tendency to concentrate it into labyrinthine fluid, and from the labyrinthine fluid they diffuse out very slowly. Because of the longer period of contact into the labyrinthine fluid, they cause destruction of the cochlear and vestibular hair cells. Eardrop which are instilled into the patients having perforated eardrum can cause this type of toxicity very easily. Let's see the ototoxicity in somewhat more detail. Ototoxicity is of two varieties. One is cochlear damage and other is vestibular damage. First we see cochlear damage. Cochlear damage will start from the base of the cochlea and progresses towards the apex, which means high frequency of the sound is affected first, followed by low frequency. Initially patient is very asymptomatic and he may not have any problem except few disturbances into the hearing. That is why they need audiometry for diagnosis of such kind of cochlear damage. Tinnitus may be the initial symptom of cochlear damage and it disappears after the stoppage of aminoglycoside drug. If drug is continued, then there is a possibility of progressive hearing loss and permanent deafness may result because of the inadvertent use of aminoglycosides. This risk is very high into the elderly patient and those who are having pre-existing ear condition or hearing defect, they are more prone to development of such toxicities. Other type of ototoxicity is vestibular damage. Vestibular apparatus is responsible for our motion and stability. When this kind of toxicity occurs, patient suffers from headache, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, nystagmus, vertigo or ataxia and loss of balance. Even if the drug is stopped in time, this stage of vestibular damage once initiated will last for next 6 to 10 weeks. Usually patient is asymptomatic into the bed. He does not feel any vertigo or ataxia while sleeping, but as soon as he is out of the bed, he develops ataxia, vertigo, not able to maintain posture. Some effect is compensated by proprioception or visual reflexes which help the individual to walk and carry out day-to-day activity, but still patient is ataxic and requires continuous monitoring. Recovery may occur in next 1 to 2 years and in some patients the recovery is only partial. When we compare different aminoglycosides for their relative ototoxicity, streptomycin and kanamycin are having highest ototoxicity, followed by amikacin, gentamicin and tobramycin. Another type of toxicity is nephrotoxicity. All the aminoglycosides are toxic to the kidneys and this effect is also dose related. High concentration of drug is usually there into the renal cortex and this toxicity is more into the elderly patient and those who are having pre-existing renal diseases. The manifestations are usually of tubular damage which includes albuminuria, presence of cast into the urine, nitrogen retention into the body, low GFR and loss of urinary concentrating ability. Ultimately, as the kidney damage progresses, there is reduction into the GFR and clearances reduces. So reduced clearance will further enhance the toxicity of the drug because drug will more accumulated into the kidney. But this side effect is reversible if the drug is stopped promptly. That is why it is always mandatory to monitor renal function test while you are prescribing the patient with aminoglycoside. And dose reduction is required into the patient those who are having pre-existing renal conditions. And when we compare aminoglycoside for their nephrotoxicity, they are having almost same type of nephrotoxicity, but kanamycin is having highest and streptomycin is having lowest nephrotoxicity. Another common toxicity produced by this group of drug is neuromuscular blockage. They reduce the acetylcholine release from the motor nerves And sensitivity of the end plate is also reduced with the acetylcholine, which leads to neuromuscular paralysis type of symptoms. It does not manifest at the usual clinical doses, but they can enhance the action of curare-like drugs. Larger doses of aminoglycoside may lead to frank muscular paralysis. The possibility of neuromuscular blockage is high with neomycin and streptomycin, and it is least with the tobramycin. This neuromuscular blockage can partly be reversed by IV administration of calcium. Sometimes one can use neostigmine also for the treatment, but as a treatment point of view, value of neostigmine is inconsistent because it does not produce effect in all the patients. This is just a summary of comparison of vestibular toxicity, cochlear toxicity and nephrotoxicity of all the aminoglycoside drugs. You can see here that all the aminoglycoside produces all these three toxicity to the smaller or larger extent. So what precautions are required for the use of aminoglycosides? They are to be avoided into the pregnancy to avoid fetal ototoxicity. They should not be prescribed with other ototoxic drugs like minocycline or furosemide. They should not be prescribed with other nephrotoxic drugs like vancomycin, cisplatin and amphotericin B. Caution is required while prescribing aminoglycoside into elderly and kidney damaged patients. And cautious use of muscle relaxant is always advisable into the patient who are receiving aminoglycosides. And most important drug interaction to be remembered with aminoglycoside is never mix aminoglycoside into same syringe with any other drug. Never add aminoglycoside into any infusion bottle because it is a larger molecule, cannot mix with any other substance and the drug will be destroyed. So always give aminoglycoside as a single administration drug. Now we come to the pharmacokinetics of aminoglycoside. Because of the larger molecular size, they cannot be absorbed orally, and if they are administered orally, they pass as such into the feces. There is quick absorption after IM administration and the drug is distributed extracellularly only because of the larger molecular size. That is why it achieves very low concentration into serous fluids, CSF and aqueous humor. The drug is excreted through the glomerular filtration by the kidney, and the drug excretion rate is usually parallel to the creatinine clearance rate by the patient. The drug has tendency to accumulate into the elderly patients, neonate and into the renal insufficiency patient where reduction in the dose and frequency is required. Concentration of the aminoglycosides into the CSF are always inadequate even when the meninges are inflamed. Except neomycin, the aminoglycoside needs to be administered intrathecally or intraventricularly. Meningitis is a condition where inflammation or infection of the meninges occurs, where drug of choice is either third generation cephalosporin combined with aminoglycosides or penicillin combined with aminoglycoside. Into this condition, the seriousness of the condition demands prompt action. But because of the larger molecular size, aminoglycoside cannot cross blood-brain barrier. That is why they are combined with other bacterial cell wall synthesis inhibitor drug which will help in entry into the microorganism. But how the drug will enter in by crossing the blood-brain barrier, that is not possible. So it is always better to administer the drug intrathecally or intraventricularly. High concentration accumulates into the renal cortex and into the endolymph and perilymph of the inner ear, which may account for their nephrotoxic and ototoxic potential. All aminoglycosides can cross the placental barrier and they may accumulate into the fetal plasma and amniotic fluid, which is dangerous for the developing babies. Now we come to certain peculiarities of aminoglycosides. Aminoglycosides produce bactericidal effect and they follow concentration dependent killing. What is concentration dependent killing? It is the phenomena where the greater concentration of the drug, the greater rate of bacterial killing is achieved, which means you can administer the drug once daily into high concentration, which is sufficient to kill most of the microorganism. These drugs are also having sufficient post-antibiotic effect. Because of this property, once daily dosing of aminoglycoside is always employed. The result is fewer toxicity, less expensive and highly efficacious drug. The toxicities of the aminoglycosides are also associated with the concentration of a drug. So, because the drug is following concentration dependent killing, you can give once daily administration, drug will reach the peak concentration, kills the bacteria and fall down below the minimum required level. When the drug concentration falls below the certain level, there is no chance to get accumulated into the endolymph or renal cortex or any other area. So toxicity is very much reduced while you can achieve the bacterial killing at the sufficient required rate. That is why aminoglycosides are always given once daily dosing. Now let's start with the individual drugs in this category. First is streptomycin. As you all know, it is the first aminoglycoside to be discovered by scientist Waxman into the year 1944 from Streptomyces griseus. It is considered as a narrow spectrum drug, primarily active against gram-negative bacteria. It is effective against H. ducreyi, Brucella, Yersinia pestis, F. tularensis, Nocardia, granulomatosis and tuberculosis. Few E. coli, influenza, Vibrio cholerae, Shigella, Klebsiella and certain gram-positive cocci are still sensitive with the streptomycin, but Pseudomonas and all other gram-negative bacilli are now become resistant with the streptomycin. How resistance develops with the streptomycin? It is very rapid in progression with one-step mutation. Plasmid coded inactivating enzymes are produced by the microorganism to inactivate the streptomycin. E. coli, influenza, streptococci and staphylococci are now resistant with the streptomycin. Mycobacterium tuberculosis will also develop resistance with the streptomycin if it is used alone into the treatment of tuberculosis. That is why into the tuberculosis treatment we always give multi-drug therapy. We combine more than 2 antibiotics together to prevent the resistance of the organism towards any one of the antibiotic. And partial unidirectional cross resistance exists with the streptomycin. What are the adverse drug reaction? One is generalized toxicity as described earlier, that is ototoxicity, nephrotoxicity and neuromuscular blockage, but they have more prominent vestibular toxicity and they are having lowest nephrotoxic potential. Rarely they can cause rashes, fever, eosinophilia, exfoliative dermatitis and anaphylaxis. Sensitization may occur after topical use with streptomycin. Occasionally it can cause paresthesia and scotoma and pain at the injection site may occur with the streptomycin. So where to use streptomycin? It is available as injection of 0.75 and 1 gram dry powder into the vial and it is always to be prepared freshly. It is drug of choice for tuberculosis. It is the primary first line drug used into the combination with all other drugs of tuberculosis. It can also be used for the treatment of subacute bacterial endocarditis where it is concurrently prescribed with penicillin. Now gentamicin is preferred for this purpose. It can also be used for the treatment of plague, but tetracycline is preferred for the mass use because of its oral administration. It is drug of choice for tularemia also, where nowadays we prefer tetracycline because tetracycline can be given orally while streptomycin needs to IM administered IM. Next aminoglycoside is gentamicin. It is derived from the Micromonospora purpurea it is more potent than streptomycin. It also affects Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Protease, E. coli, Klebsiella, Enterobacter and Serratia. It inhibits Streptococcus faecalis and some staph also, but it does not have any effect on Mycobacteria, S. pyogenes and S. pneumoniae, and it is relatively more toxic. So preparation and doses for gentamicin is it is available as injection of 20, 60, 80 and 200 milligram per vial as injectable formulation, and eye and ear drops of gentamicin are also available as 0.3% strength, and skin ointment of 0.1% strength is also available. Dose is according to the body weight and renal function, but normally it is given as 3 to 5 milligram per kg per day into single dose or 3 divided doses. But we prefer single administration of gentamicin. Dose reduction is required into the deterioration of the renal function patients. If the patient's creatinine clearance is 70 ml per minute, then 70% of the daily dose is to be given. If creatinine clearance is 50 ml per minute, then 50% of the daily dose is to be given. If creatinine clearance is 30 ml per minute, then 30% of the dose is to be given. But when creatinine clearance goes below the 30 ml per minute, that is between 10 to 30 ml per minute, then 60% of the dose is to be given on alternate day. And when creatinine clearance is less than 10 ml per minute, then 40% of the dose is to be administered on alternate day. So where gentamicin is to be used? The use is restricted to serious gram-negative infections only. It can be useful for respiratory tract infection, where it is designed for prevention and treatment of critically ill patient, poor host defense mechanism, the patient who are admitted into the ICU, post-operative patients, and usually for the treatment of pneumonia and other respiratory tract infection. It is always given in combination with beta-lactam antibiotics. It can also be given for the treatment of urinary tract infection, burns, osteomyelitis and lung abscess which is caused by Pseudomonas, Protease and Klebsiella, which are resistant with all other drugs. It can also be given for the treatment of meningitis, where 4 mg of gentamicin can be added intrathecally in combination with the third generation cephalosporin, which we have discussed earlier. It can also be given for the treatment of subacute bacterial endocarditis, where it is combined with the penicillins. Next aminoglycoside is tobramycin. It is derived from the S. tenebrarius. The spectrum, pharmacokinetic, doses and preparations are same as gentamicin. It is 2 to 4 times more active against resistant Pseudomonas organism. It is reserved alternative to gentamicin for serious Pseudomonas and Protease infections only. It is probably less ototoxic and nephrotoxic than gentamicin. Next drug is kanamycin. It is derived from the Kanamyceticus and it is second to be discovered after streptomycin in year 1957. It is similar to streptomycin in all respect except that it is not active against Pseudomonas aeruginosa. It is very much toxic to the kidney and cochlea. That is why it is not used nowadays because of the narrow spectrum and toxicity. But still it is a reserved drug for tuberculosis patients. Next aminoglycoside is amikacin. Amikacin is probably the most frequently used aminoglycoside in current practice. It is semi-synthetic which is derived from the kanamycin. It is resistant to bacterial inactivating enzyme. That is why it can act against many of the organisms where kanamycin cannot work. It is having wider spectrum. It affects the organisms which are resistant to other aminoglycoside. High doses are used for the Pseudomonas and Protease infection also. Uses are same as gentamicin, but it is to be used into the resistant and nosocomial infections only. It is having more cochlear toxicity than vestibular toxicity. Dose of amikacin is 15 mg per kg per day in 1 to 3 divided doses. or 7.5 milligram per kg per day into urinary tract infection. But like all other aminoglycoside, though it is written into certain textbook that it is given 1 to 3 times a day, it is always given once daily. Preparation available are 100 milligram, 250 milligram and 500 milligram injection available into 2 ml vials. Next aminoglycoside is natilmycin. It is semi-synthetic, which is derived from the cecomycin. It is resistant to inactivating enzymes. It is active against gentamicin resistant organism. It is having more activity against Klebsiella, Enterobacter and Staph, while less activity against Pseudomonas. Pharmacokinetic and doses are same as gentamicin. It is less ototoxic than gentamicin and tobramycin. Uses are same as gentamicin but reserved for resistant and nosocomial cases only. Next aminoglycoside we are going to discuss is that is neomycin. It is derived from the Streptomyces spreadii. Most gram-negative and some gram-positive bacteria are affected with neomycin, but it cannot have any effect on Pseudomonas and Streptococcus pyogenes. It is highly ototoxic, nephrotoxic. That is why it is never used systemically. It is given as 0.25 to 1 gram 4 times a day orally for local action into the GIT or 0.3 to 0.5% ointment for topical purpose. Available as 250 500 milligram tablets, 0.3 and 0.5% skin ointment, 0.5% eye ointment, and it is also a part of many topical preparation as combination therapy. So where neomycin is to be used? Topically, it is used in combination with polymyxin and bacitracin for infected wounds, ulcer, burns. Topically into the eye, it can be useful for conjunctivitis. Into the ear, it can be useful for external ear infections. When it is administered orally, the use is limited to the GIT. First use is preparation of the bowel for the surgery. When you are going to operate on the large intestine, it is necessary that all the fecal material is removed from the large intestine as well as the intestine becomes non-infective in terms of pathogenic organism so that there is less chance of septicemia post-operatively. Neomycin administered orally before the surgery can reduce the post-operative infections. Other peculiar use of neomycin into the oral category is treatment of hepatic coma. What happens in hepatic coma? Normally, ammonia is converted into the urea by the liver, and when liver failure is there, the ammonia cannot be converted into urea and ammonia remains inside the body. The blood ammonia level get increased. It may lead to encephalopathy. What is the role of neomycin? Neomycin can suppress all the GIT bacteria, so the formation of the ammonia into the GIT is very much reduced, which can be very helpful into the patients of hepatic coma. That is why oral neomycin is always given for the patients of hepatic coma. Adverse effect of neomycin: when used topically, it may produce rashes. When given orally, it can cause damage to the intestinal villi, which may lead to malabsorption syndrome. Sometimes superinfection with the candida is reported. Small amount, if absorbed, may produce ototoxicity and nephrotoxicity into renal failure patients. If mistakenly applied into the serous cavity, it may lead to apnea. Another common topically used aminoglycoside is fremicetin, which is derived from the S. levedonardi, which is very commonly known as soframycin, and it is available as a household medication in most of the homes. The therapeutic use and all other aspects are very similar to neomycin. It is meant for topical use only. So this finishes our discussion on aminoglycoside, but only one drug is remaining, that is spectinomycin. It is aminocyclitol antibiotic which is structurally related to aminoglycoside, but it lacks amino sugar and glycosidic bonds. It is showing in vitro activity against many gram-positive and gram-negative organisms, but it is solely reserved for the treatment of gonorrhea patient, those who are allergic to penicillin, or the gonococci which are resistant with all other drugs. They can be treated with spectinomycin. Most of the gonococci can be killed by concentration of 6 gram per ml of spectinomycin. Strains of gonococci may be resistant to spectinomycin, but there is no cross resistance with other drugs used into the gonorrhea. Spectinomycin is rapidly absorbed after IM injection. Single dose of 40 mg per kg up to a maximum 2 gram can be given as a single dose for the treatment of gonorrhea. Adverse drug reactions are pain at the injection site, occasionally fever and nausea, rarely nephrotoxicity, and anemia can be there. But spectinomycin is a drug related to aminoglycoside reserved for the treatment of resistant gonorrhea infections only. So thank you students. I hope you have understand the topic well, and if you have any queries you can ask. Thank you.